Calvin Castine probably off camera.
Oh, squeeze in there, Calvin.
That's all right. We're going to talk again with that prolific young writer that has been storming the North Country for how many years now? When did
I don't
is
know.
this the first one here, Gordie?
That's the first one. That's a long time ago.
Gordie
I
Little.
forget when this book was published, Calvin, but it was a long time ago. And let me see, 2009. Can you believe that? What
Six
is that?
years ago. 7 years ago now. 7 years ago, Ghosts of Clinton County, and that started Gordie thinking that, well, if I if I can sell one book, maybe I can sell more. And we're going to be looking at his latest endeavor, but chronologically, what was next? Champy, probably?
The Little Champy book with Larry Gooley of Bloated Toe Enterprises. This was kind of a labor of love and had to do, all these things were, as a matter of fact. I was on the radio
That's
for a long time.
This is a children's book.
And this is a children's book, and I just decided that I needed to do something for a living when I walked out of the radio station one day in April of 1997, and so I wrote lots of things. And then I realized, you're happy with what you've done, why not share them with people? So it's a difficult business to write books and get them published, or write anything and get them published, as you know. So I wrote lots of letters looking for literary agents, looking for publishing companies and so on, and I was absolutely discouraged until I met up with North Country Books in Utica, the last big publisher in northern New York, and told them about my ghost stories, and they said, okay, we'll publish it. And the rest, as they say, is history. They accepted it. I made a contract with them, and I've been selling books through them on many different places in many stores and venues since that time. So then Larry Gooley and the Little Champy book about Little Champy Goes to School, a children's book. And then
we got to mention your illustrator.
Oh, my good friend Les Bradford, who flew the last B-52 bomber out of Plattsburgh Air Force Base, retired Air Force pilot, a dear, dear friend, now in his 80s, retired and living in Peru, New York on the River Road. It's just one of those things, pure serendipity, that threw us together. And at my kitchen table one time, I coerced him, and that's the proper word, into illustrating that. And he went through the process kicking and screaming, but did such a wonderful job with his line drawings. And then he introduced me to his wonderful daughter, Janelle Mishonsky, who's affectionately known as Kay, without the E. My wife's name is Kay with the E. And she had a partner at that time, Marcia Wright Reeves, in Texas. And I asked them if they would be willing to illustrate another book called Sparkles and Shiner, another children's book. And they said, yes, we'd love to do it. So they took up the task of illustrating, and it took them a long time to do the fabulous, fabulous color illustrations. And when they finished, my friends at Border Press, Jim Rochester and Elaine and Danny, said, yeah, we'd be delighted to print and publish that book for you. And so they did. And it's been tremendously successful, especially around Christmas time, because it's kind of a Christmas story. And then came the coloring book called The Gordie Little Giggles, where I did drawings while I was on the radio, as you would doodle if you were on the telephone. I did that when I was talking to people on the radio, on the telephone, playing records. And my wife kept all those drawings, which were signed and dated, thousands and thousands and thousands of them.
Inside.
And here's one that more people have colored that I can imagine. And every time somebody finishes this drawing, they send it to me. So we picked 30 some of these drawings. Elaine did mostly at Rochester, and decided to put them in the book one at a time with blank pages on the other side. Some people are using crayons, some people are using pastels. I use colored pencils, And I've enjoyed coloring every single one in this book, and so have hundreds and hundreds of other people, to the point where the first edition is just about totally sold out. So guess what? I'll be calling Elaine saying, hey, we need to do a volume 2. But since she has a thumb drive with 7,222 objects on it, including over 5,000 drawings, I think if I live to be 171, we will be able to put out new editions of the Gordie Little Giggles, which are called Giggles because I signed my name G. Little.
Okay, and that's like you said, chapter 1, and who knows?
Volume
You
one
got
to-
enough for
Oh yeah,
another
people are still
50 at least.
ordering copies of it, and I'm like I said, I'm just about out. I have a few more in my little valise in the back of the car in case somebody wants one.
Okay.
So then,
Okay. Well, today is March 16th, 2016. So now I'll let you continue.
well, a long time ago, when I left the radio business, I wrote prolifically for that entire year. People asked me to write for the local newspapers. People asked me to write for some local magazines. Calvin came to me and said, I think we ought to do a television program to replace what the late Bob Venn was doing and what's going on here. So my life changed abruptly. And you know, my life is like one of these books, Calvin. Next chapter. Turn the page and do whatever you need to do. And the books were selling well. So I wrote a thing called Marilyn and the Magic Closet. And I don't know about any of you people who are either writers or aspiring journalists or writers who are out there today, but perhaps you feel like what you do is inspired. I can't stand to take full credit for anything I do because I'm not smart enough to do any of the things you see on this table or have seen me do or heard me do down through the years. The good Lord is with me, and that's why I pray every morning for the energy and prayers of gratitude for good health and so on to be able to continue. So most of my kids went to Saranac Central School. And there's a street in Saranac called Ganong Drive, named after the late Dr. Ganong, who made house calls and treated so many people and their ancestors who might be watching this program that they named a street after him. And as I would be driving down Ganong Drive, which runs fairly parallel to Route 3 through Saranac, and on the other opposite side from the Independent Cemetery, I saw an old house. And I said to myself, there's something charming about that old house. And being interested in ghost stories for all that time, my imagination began to work, and thank goodness for the imagination. And over the years, that house grew on me into my intellect, into my imagination, and I said, wow, I wonder if I should write a story about it. And so one day, I was so overcome by the feeling that I should do it that I went home and wrote this entire story in one afternoon. And it's called Marilyn and the Magic Closet. And it's just a little story about a little girl from that area whose father loves to flip houses, if anybody knows what that is. They would buy a house and live in it, and he would rebuild it and remodel an old house, and then they would sell it. And it just happens that they bought this little old house on the end of Ganong Drive, and in the process, she went into a room that was to be her bedroom, and somehow got inside one of the closets and the door closed. And when she got it opened again, she was in England hundreds of years ago. And what happened to her in England and how she got to meet a bunch of people that looked strangely like her own family is interesting and amazing to me. And look back in it, I still don't know where the story came from except in the ethers. But I call it the Lost Manuscript. You can see that I've even called it that on the front of it. I'm showing you this particular page which Elaine Rochester gave me because initially she had hoped to put a rectangle around this very critical object, which is a glowing glass doorknob. Perhaps you had some in your old houses. And she She said, well, wait a minute, how about the oval one? And so I came home and asked my wife and asked friends and asked Calvin and many other people, and I think we've settled on the oval, so that's the way it's going to be. So in any case, I wrote the story. Nobody cared. And one day I was invited to the elementary school in Cadyville to read. The school hasn't been opened in many years. So I read the story, and teachers were very kind, and they clapped and they enjoyed it. And this one little girl seemed very deeply moved by it and asked me if she could borrow it to show to her mother, because it hadn't been published, of course. Now, in those days, I had an ancient computer, and I didn't know how to save anything on it. I just knew how to type on it. So I didn't think I had saved it, but I did have that one copy and that one copy only, and let her take it home and begged her to bring it back the next day. And, you can see where the story is going. She never brought it back. The teacher didn't know who she was, which student had asked for it. And so for years, maybe almost 15 years, it was gone. It was missing. Have you ever tried to recreate something that you lost? Have you ever been writing an email or a Facebook message and it just went from the screen and filtered out through the universe into the ethers, and you tried to rewrite it and you couldn't? Well, I couldn't. And I gave up on it, even though I enjoyed the story, until one day one of my sons, who lives in Morrisonville near me, called up and said I was going through my junk drawer and I found a floppy disk, and it has your name on it. Bingo. The electric light, that from the old cartoons, went off in my head. And I said, if it says Marilyn on it, I'll kiss you on both cheeks. Well, I don't know if I kissed him or not, but it did say Marilyn on it. And the lost manuscript was found. And with a few minor revisions and a lot of help from my friends at Border Press at 37 Clinton Street in Rouse's Point, Marilyn and the Magic Closet is ready to be published in the spring of 2016. We have a proof copy here, and a number of illustrations that I think are pretty fantastic. And a lot of the book has to do with history, because I think little kids ought to be told about the history of their area. And that's why Calvin and I have spent so much time at the museums in the area, at the Babby's Farm and Family with Leeward and his crew out there on the River Road in Peru. And so when this little girl goes into that old house, she sees a kitchen with ancient stuff in there, like a dry sink, like a pump, like a cistern in the cellar, and on and on. And then she goes into a bedroom and she sees a 4-poster bed with a chamber pot under the bed. And who watching this program even knows what we're talking about? And a skeleton key, which is critical. So she has an adventure based on those experiences. And like Calvin, I love to give credit where credit is due. And we did a recent program with Woodman Life honoring a friend of mine by the name of Dave Justice, because he's been one of the great unsung heroes in our community. He's done so much for people behind the scenes without hardly anybody knowing about it at Christmas time, feeding families, giving presents to the kids, doing whatever he can. And so Woodman gave him a nice award and had a banquet in his honor and others one night. And Woodman were there and I was there. And so I thought it would be necessary to work Dave Justice into this program into this book, because I found out that a lot of kids do not like clowns. They're afraid of clowns. And so I used that in the story. And the moral of the part with Dave Justice involved, and he's a good clown. He was in parades, and he is in parades. So I didn't mention his name in the book, but he'll know who it was, and those people who read this book who know Dave will know who it is. So there's a part of it about Dave, and about clowns and about the parades in downtown Plattsburgh. And I used as many local landmarks as I could, including Ganong Drive in Saranac and Kleberg and Redford and a couple other places that people might be familiar with. So, it took a long time to put it together, but it's a fruition of a dream for me to see it in print, because it has, you know, with your name on it, with the pictures that somebody has done so beautifully by the gals in Texas. And I'm just so absolutely pleased that Janelle and Marcia Wright Reeves have consented to illustrate this book and have done all those illustrations for me. It takes a long time because somebody has to read your manuscript and see inside your head and try to determine what the girl should look like. What should her dog with all of its new puppies look like? What should this old house look like? And for goodness sake, what should that wonderful little cottage that she found in England hundreds of years ago, what would that look like, just based on the words that I wrote in my manuscript? Well, because there was magic involved, and because somebody up there started to shine a flashlight on me, it turned out beautifully in that respect. I have no idea how the book is going to sell. My books are available in many venues around the North Country. I never found a publisher outside this area. Larry Gooley has done some work for me and will be doing some more. The Border Press has done several books for me, and they'll be doing some more. And I'll be doing a lot of the marketing myself, so people can go on my Facebook page, Gordie Little and Gordie Little, Who's He? And now Timmy has assured me, Timmy Gagnon, who helped me with those Facebook pages, has told me that they still have GordieLittle.com sewed up. I guess once you sign up for something like that, if you keep it going, you can use it. So hopefully in the future there'll be some kind of a web page, and I'll be selling those books there. In the meantime, you can find those at the stores. Many of the stores, the businesses and bookstores in this area have been so kind to me down through the years. I'd like to thank them all personally, but the list is so long I can't mention them specifically. So if there's ever any question, my name is in the phone book. My email address is Gord, Gordand, the letter K, at AOL.com, and I can be reached anytime either by email, on Facebook, or on the telephone. So it's an adventure for me, and I hope for other people too, and I don't know how many other books might be packed away. I do know there are at least 500 more ghost stories just waiting to jump out into the North Country, and perhaps I can get to another ghost story book this year too, Cal.